You see, every organization reaches a point in its lifetime where something feels wrong long before it shows up in reports. People are still showing up, work is still being done, targets they're still being met, but conversations become careful, meetings become quieter, energy becomes transactional. At that moment, organizations almost instinctively turn to human resources and say, we have a culture problem. But that reflex already tells us everything that we need to know, because you see, culture is not created in HR. It is created where power sits, where power lies. It is shaped by leadership, behavior, and reinforced by the associated leadership decisions, and then sustained by what leadership chooses to tolerate. So HR may write policies, we may run surveys, facilitate workshops, and report trends, but HR does not decide who gets protected or who gets promoted, who gets excused, and who gets silenced. It is leadership that decides all that. So culture is not what organizations say they value, it is what people learn is safe to do. It is what happens when someone speaks up and watches what follows. It is what happens when results are achieved through fear or exhaustion and leadership chooses not to intervene. It is also what happens when one person breaks the rules and nothing happens, while another follows the rules and pray and pays the price. Over time, people stop listening to what is written and start paying attention to what actually happens in the organization. That is culture. Welcome to People and Platforms. My name is Carlo-Marcel Dube, and today we are discussing culture in organization. Because you see, an organization's real culture becomes visible when you watch patterns, not statements, on the wall or anywhere else, or spoken for that matter. You watch who advances and who stalls or stagnates. You watch who burns out and who is praised for excellence. You watch which conversations happen in meetings and which only happen in corridors or WhatsApp groups. That is where you find culture. You watch how mistakes are handled when the person involved is powerful versus when they are not. You watch culture live in those moments, not in documents. So why does this idea persist that culture belongs to HR? It's because assigning culture to HR allows leadership to keep authority while without carrying the responsibility. It allows leadership to treat culture as an operational issue instead of a personal one. It turns culture into something that can be managed, that can be fixed, repaired by someone else, rather than something that reflects leadership behavior in real time. Instead of asking, what has my leadership normalized, leaders will then ask, what program should HR roll out to fix the culture? And instead of asking, what behavior have we rewarded, they then ask, why is engagement so low? HR must be doing something wrong, or they need to do something. Now, that move is not accidental. I think it is avoidance that is embedded in leadership. This avoidance is even pronounced in many African organizational contexts where power distance remains high and authority is rarely challenged openly. So many organizations still carry the residue of hierarchical systems that trained people to equate silence with respect and obedience with safety. In these environments, leadership behavior carries disproportionate weight because employees quickly learn that reading power correctly matters more than trusting formal systems. So there you go. Psychological safety does not disappear suddenly in such contexts. It is slowly trained out of people. Employees learn which questions are safe to ask and which ones are not safe to ask. They learn how to disagree politely enough not to be noticed and when not to disagree at all. They learn that being labeled as difficult or not aligned can quietly stall one's career, even when no rule has been broken at all. Because you see, HR may encourage openness through surveys, listening sessions, and town halls. But leadership behavior determines whether openness survives contact with reality. If leaders punish dissent, ignore concerns, or respond defensively when challenged, the employees will adapt, not because they lack courage, but because they understand the system. And this creates a contradiction that many organizations refuse to face. Leaders say they want innovation, they want honesty, they want engagement, while maintaining leadership styles that punish, challenge, and reward compliance. HR is then expected to work some magic and resolve this contradiction to somehow manufacture trust inside the system that actively undermines it. That is not a skills gap issue. It is a leadership integrity, a leadership consistency problem. When leaders say culture is HR's responsibility, what they are really doing is outsourcing the discomfort that comes with approaching that heads on. So HR becomes the buffer that absorbs frustration from employees, that translates leadership failure into neutral language and keeps the organization calm enough to function a healthy industrial climate. But buffers do not change systems, they just merely delay consequences. And true leadership, ownership of culture looks quite different from putting defense mechanisms. It begins with leaders recognizing that their behavior is always being read, watched, especially when they are under pressure. Tone, body language, timing, who is listened to, who is dismissed, who is punished, who is defended. These are small, tiny signals. They are cultural instructions, however. When leaders are tired, stressed, or irritated, they teach the organization what really matters. So that is what employees actually see. Leadership ownership of culture also means refusing to reward results achieved through harm. Many organizations will celebrate performance without interrogating how that performance is delivered. It reminds me of a case. I think it is widely used in ethics and organizational governance studies. The case of Enron, where performance was at the back of immoral or unethical behavior. So when you put up a performance management system that rewards unethical behavior by only focusing on the outcome than also the process of achieving the outcome, then you create ripe ground for the festering of unethical conduct or performance that is sponsored by unethical behavior. So, as organizations, we cannot celebrate performance without interrogating how that performance was delivered. So, it gets us to the point where we need to be interested in looking at how performance was actually achieved. Because fear, intimidation, and burnout are also tolerated as long as targets are met. This teaches people that outcomes matter more than dignity, regardless of what the values say. So it's kind of a black box of performance where the interest is only on the bags at the end of the line, but not in the process in between. So culture changes when leadership is willing to say that results without respect are not success. That cannot be the face of success. It also shows up in how the middle managers, line managers, are often handled. Culture collapses in the middle layer, where pressures from above meets fear from the grassroots. Senior leaders may speak convincingly about values, but middle managers they have the responsibility of translating these values into daily experience. And when middle managers are insecure, they are poorly developed or politically protected, culture erodes quietly and consistently. Leadership ownership means taking people leadership seriously, not treating it as a reward for tenure or loyalty. And then there is transparency. Decision made in secrecy creates suspicion. Silence creates stories. And when leadership explain the reasoning behind difficult decisions, even unpopular ones, that is where trust grows. And when leaders hide behind authority or ambiguity, it evaporates. Just like that. Because culture follows clarity. Where does HR actually fit? The role of HR is not to own culture, it is to expose it, to surface patterns, leaders may prefer not to see, to present evidence that contradicts comforting narratives. It is to name misalignment between stated values and the lived experience, the so-called employee experience. The role is uncomfortable, it is often unwelcome, but it remains essential. And strong HR does not protect leadership comfort. It protects organizational integrity because the organization is greater than its leaders. Weak leadership, often will resent that, will dislike it. So here is the question that I think every leader should sit with, that should ask themselves with honesty, without being defensive. When culture deteriorates around you as a leader, is your first instinct to ask HR what to do, or to ask what your leadership has made possible? Because culture is not waiting to be fixed, it is already responding to you. And until leadership is willing to own that reality, culture will remain everybody's problem and no one's responsibility. This has been People and Platforms. My name is Carlo-Marcel Dube. I hope you found that insightful, and I hope it starts a conversation wherever you are. Cheers.